Alright, Astro subscribers. Sorry about my last video. I didn't realize my back was to a 6-lane highway. So I think my voice came through nice and clearly. But yeah, I know there's going to be some background noise, so I'm sorry about that if it bothers anybody. So I am going to be talking about the fourth layer today. And this alludes to my previous video that I made about trying to solve the frame problem in astrology, which is what level of perception is appropriate to solving what problem when you're looking at astrology. So we know that one of the ways that astrology was used in the Middle Ages, and probably way before that, was as a diagnostic tool. And I think astrology is still very useful as a diagnostic tool, if it's done properly. And part of diagnosis and part of looking at the world through a particular set of perspectives is you have to know what level of analysis to measure at. And if you get the wrong level of analysis, you could be missing something vital. So, as an example in astrology, if you are trying to solve a problem related to how somebody's going to react in a particular situation. Like, let's say you want to figure out how somebody's likely to react to something ahead of time. What type of analysis, what type of lens are you going to look at their chart through? So, let's say, to give a more concrete example, you're trying to get somebody a Christmas present. Since it's December, I guess I'll start with that. You're trying to give somebody a Christmas present, and you're trying to figure out what they would like. Are you going to be, like, what level of analysis are you going to be looking at their chart through? Are you going to be looking at the hour system? So how their perspective shifts around hour by hour? Well, probably not, because if your perspective is changing hour by hour, if that's your lens that you're looking at trying to get them a Christmas present through, hopefully their Christmas present is going to last more than an hour. So you're going to want to go with something a little less temporary, a little more permanent when you're looking at their chart. So what I would go for is the signs. It's the sign system. And that's a very trivial, sort of fundamental example, but it gets into the heart of what I'm trying to discuss here. So I guess the ways that you could divide up the layer system, the lenses of perception, is the way I've started to compartmentalize and analyze these things is I've listed the layers as 4 to 13 to start out with. There's more than that, but we can just start with 4 to 13. The reason we're starting with 4 is because the first 3 layers are the first 3 dimensions of physical space. So you have the line, the plane, and the 3-dimensional object with length, width, and depth. And the 4th dimension is going to be time. And, of course, all of astrology is related to time and space. But when I'm talking about time in the perspective of the 4th layer, I mean something a little different than what most people say by time. I mean time as a like sort of a small timeline, or like a timeline segment. So if you imagine that the first layer is a line, just an abstract sort of line, which obviously doesn't exist in real life, but real life is technically made of those sort of lines. And then the second layer is a plane, or a field of lines. So a plane is an infinite number of lines. And then in the same way, say that plane is a square plane, and then you do the same thing you did to the line to make the plane, you do to the plane, and then what happens? You take the plane, you raise it, and all of a sudden you've got a cube, right? So this is the nature of how dimensions operate. All you do is you translate the thing 90 degrees, a certain amount, and you get the next dimension. So what happens if you translate a cube, let's say, or a circle, it doesn't matter what shape it is, a 3D shape, 90 degrees in a new way? in another direction. What happens is you're going to get a sort of cube across time. You're going to get the transformations of the cube as it's going about its cube life, as it's going about its day-to-day life. You're not going to get the sum total of all potential timelines the cube could exist in, but you are going to get a line segment of, let's say, that cube going to the store. So let's say that you're a 3D entity, for at least in the physical, and you're moving to the store. You're moving down the street. You're moving down a trail. Wherever you're moving to and from work. That's going to be the fourth layer of perception. Now, this is an example of the sort of transcension of dimensionality that I'm going to be referring to. So just always think, like, when you're moving from one dimension to another, all you're doing is taking the shape that came before, so let's say like a cube, and you're moving it in another direction, a new dimension, a certain amount of space. So you could think of the fourth dimension as a timeline segment. And it's limited, right? Because you could move to the store, or you could move to work, or you could move from one place to another, and you actually wouldn't know why you're doing it, right? Things do this all the time, like, except for like barnacles and mollusks and stuff that just sit on a rock and filter seawater. Everything moves. Every life form moves around, but very few life forms know why they're moving around. So in my sense, the next step that you could contextualize this dimension to would be knowledge of why you are moving from place to place, right? So just because you are sort of unconsciously drawn in a direction, because a cow is drawn toward grass or a lion is drawn toward a cow, these things do not know why they're doing what they're doing. They don't have any perspective. They don't have any elevated consciousness. They simply have an impulse, and then they follow that impulse to its destination. And that's basically the time frame we're talking about with the fourth layer. Now, think back on all the planets and entities that I've talked about that could theoretically symbolize, be an analogous character representation to the fourth layer. I think Rahu would have to be the best analysis, right? Or the best comparison, right? Because Rahu is, what is it? It's a head with no body. It is a consuming instinct. And I've often said, Rahu is the spirit that animates animals, that animates a shark to hunt fish, that animates a fish to hunt back a little plankton in the water, or seaweed or whatever. Rahu is the unconscious upward striving that doesn't actually have any regard for rules, not because it, disrespects rules or whatever, but because it actually isn't concerned with rules. It doesn't perceive them. It doesn't know. Rules are a much higher social structure. They're related to like multiple people coming together over vast spans of time and creating these massive societies, right? Rahu is not concerned with that. Rahu is like a shark. A shark doesn't care about rules. It just wants fish. It just wants to eat, And a lot of people are like that too. And so this is a particular layer system, or an analysis of the layer system, that doesn't even really require astrological analysis or any sort of comprehensive understanding of psychology or personality or anything to understand what it's coming from. Like, most life on Earth lives in this layer. Lives in the layer of the fourth layer of Rahu, of like physical material space, and then a little something extra, little drive, a little instinct, a little consumption. And Rahu has a basic understanding of the elemental system, right? Of like the element system of fire, air, water, and earth, right? Of like the tarot card suits. Oh, that's a topic for another video. But the fire is the will, wind is or air is the thought associated with the will, the consciousness that moves the will around. Water would be the emotion that gives that thought an emotional sort of motivation to move over to the earth, which is the final element. So Rahu basically moves through the earth in 4 stages, where it has itself, its identity, that's fire, and then its thoughts, which is wind, and then its motivation and emotion, which is water, and then its material desire, which is earth. And the material, Rahu is very much the ends justify the means, and this is why. Because it's driven from its identity to earth, and that's the circuit. There's no in between. There's no morality, there's no other people. A shark is really the best analogy, or a snake. That's why Rahu is often called the head of the serpent. It represents primal instinct. So, in any situation that is dealing with unconsciousness, with just sort of blatant desire, like I want this, you can't tell me anything, this is when you're dealing with Rahu, and this is when you're dealing with the 4th layer. And this is not necessarily the most related to astrology, but because Rahu doesn't need an astrology chart in order to, or any sort of psychic model in order to function. It just functions like sharks don't check the astrology forecast or wonder about their Freudian instincts or whatever when they're going to hunt fish. Shit. There we go. They just know, I want fish, and I'm going to go. So this is sort of an introduction to the layer system in order to get you thinking in this way, where you're going to look at the star chart through a particular lens. You have to sort of compartmentalize it. And what are you going to compartmentalize it based on? Like, how are you going to analyze and decide which layer you're going to look at the chart through? And like I said, this is a foundation, but I just want to get you thinking in the way of conquest of dimensionality, of, elevating your perspective above the sort of feeding instinct of a shark, the Rahu, the material instincts, and get you thinking about the next layers to come, which is the 5th layer and then the 6th and onward. And I hope you can find this series to be not only useful but comprehensible. This is something that I've sort of created and adopted myself, and let me know what you think in the comment section. And if you have any questions or want me to clarify anything, just let me know, okay? So this is an experimental thing that I'm trying out, and if you like it, great, and if you don't, tell me what you don't like about it in the comments so I can maybe edit it and make it more clear and more apparent what I'm trying to do here. So till next time.